Welcome to part two, family, of the Dulles brothers. We'll be talking about John Foster and Allen Dulles, remembering that um, Sullivan and Cromwell was the Wall Street law firm that would conduct uh, coups for the multinational corporations. Also, along with United Fruit, would do their own coups before the founding of the CIA was invented. Okay, created. Okay, so now let's continue with the Dulles brothers. Uh, Reading from my notes and from that essay that I spoke about earlier in part one. Okay, John Foster Dulles engineered the U.S. occupation of Cuba as a favor from his uncle, who was then Secretary of Department of Navy or Under Secretary of War. He was already doing Sullivan and Cromwell's work, strong arming Latin American governments, engineering coups, etc., before World War I started. Then during World War I, he served on the War Industries Board while working at Sullivan and Cromwell. Allen Dulles was John Foster's eyes and ears while he was at the U.S. State Department and was during this World War I period actually already doing intelligence work. Okay, he was stationed during World War I by the State Department at Bern, Switzerland. Also in World War II, he was stationed in Bern, Switzerland. Okay. Bern, Switzerland was the station from which Allen Dulles would be doing all the treacherous stuff with German businessmen he called good Germans, and eventually doing the secret Operation Sunrise deal with the Nazi SS commander Karl Wolff, who at that time was already classified as an official U.S. enemy. It was a marriage of the interlocking corporate elite of the United States of America with the same of Germany, where German and U.S. corporations like Ford, GM, ITT, which is ATT today, Rockefeller Standard Oil of New Jersey, IG Farben, AEG, and Veranigite Stahlworks all became closely interlinked before and after Hitler came to power. German businessmen would serve on the board of Ford Germany, and U.S. businessmen would own huge parts of German companies. GE owned 30% of the biggest German steel and electricity trust, AEG. Okay, so a lot of intermingling going on there. Guys working, standing on each other's boards. Okay. The laws respecting German patents even trumped the need of the United States at war, which halted vital materials that America needed for the war effort. Now, one thing we got to remember during that time, the Second World War, there were two competing factions in the United States. Just like today, there are two competing factions, Donald Trump versus this idiot, Joe Biden. Okay, both of them are idiots, but whatever. Okay, the two competing factions at that time in the U.S. were the FDR faction, who represented the left New Deal socialists, like Henry Morgenthau, who wanted to put and crack down on this second group or faction, which was the Dulles faction, who were the traitors, John Foster and Allen Dulles. They were anti-Soviet, who supported Hitler and thought FDR or Franklin Delano Roosevelt was a communist. They were completely pro-German. The corporate America was pro-German. Okay, and all during the Second World War, John Foster Dulles was also pro-German, even though he disguised it. Okay, they were pro-Hitler, pro-Italy Mussolini, pro-Japan Emperor Hirohito. And after World War II, John Foster Dulles became the prime person trying to create a demonic view of the Soviet Union. Okay. Had Franklin Delano Roosevelt lived, he died before World War II ended and before they could set up the peace of the United Nations. Had FDR lived to prevent Cold War, he would have locked these people up as traitors. They had planned a coup to overthrow FDR, which was called the Business Plot of 1934, using retired Marine General Smedley Butler to lead this so-called right-wing coup. Okay, and part of this coup supposedly was J.P. Morgan, the DuPonts, the Mellons, and the Bush family. Okay. Even with Franklin Delano Roosevelt as United States President, everyone at the State Department supported the John Foster Dulles faction. When FDR died, it was clear that they were going to rebuild Germany and not punish them. So we found out that the Nuremberg trials were a sham, and very few Nazi Germans were punished. Okay. The pro-German corporate America faction totally took over American foreign policy, and they have never let it go since. And then that took us to the Cold War game. Okay. Now some other important facts about the Dulles brothers. I'm going to read off here. The different schemes that they had going on in Germany. Okay. Like the voluntary Aryanization, where German firms could buy up Jewish-owned businesses for pennies on the dollar. Okay, they bought them using bonds floated out on the international market by, for instance, U.S.-based Dillon Reed Investment Bank. This scheme was $1 billion business. Okay, and it was American investors buying these German bonds, so that these German companies could take over these Jewish businesses at pennies on the dollar. Of course, Dillon Reed, like I said, was the one floating these German bonds. Okay, and 8 people out of Dillon Reed became foreign policy planners. The 3 main ones were William Draper, James Forrestal, and Paul Nietzsche. Okay, stay tuned for part 3.